Welcome to In Depth, your weekly podcast from Press Xpress about news and newsmakers from India and Bangladesh. We bring you an in-depth review of the top stories that are making headlines. I'm Tulika, your host from Delhi. A new report by the United Nations Security Council has warned that the terror group Al-Qaeda is shaping its affiliate in the Indian subcontinent, also known as the AQIS, to expand its operations into the peripheral countries of Myanmar, Bangladesh, and India, particularly the Jammu and Kashmir region. Now, it says that the group has nearly 200 fighters, and that certain elements within the group are ready to join and collaborate with the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, the Khorasan, which it says is one of the most serious threats in Afghanistan and the wider region. Now, how meaningful is this threat in the Indian and Bangladeshi context? And is it significant enough to change the shape of militancy in this region as we know it? To talk more about this and to give us a more in depth insight into the subject, I have two excellent voices joining me today from Delhi and Dhaka. In today's episode, we are asking how is militancy evolving in South Asia? So I'd like to introduce to my first guest. He is Major General Ravi Arora. He is an army veteran having served for 35 years in the Indian Army and currently the chief editor of Indian Military Review, a national defense publication. He's joining us from Delhi, India. Welcome, sir. How are you doing today?
Very fine, thank you.
I want to start by asking you this. Now, AQIS is not new. It was formed in 2014. It's failed to have a strong hold in the region. What's changing now?
What's changing now is that it remains a latent threat, although a very significant latent threat, because over the years, although they may not have carried out attacks directly, except for a couple of them, they have inspired others to carry out attacks from their ideology. You see, actually only 10 persons from India were caught planning to travel to Syria and charge sheeted. Other than that, many others have traveled without being caught, and it is estimated that about 200 are in Syria and Iraq. Some have been captured in Afghanistan. But other than that, the Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have been busy in profiling people, selecting recruits, radicalizing them, and they are now acting as sleeper cells. A number of attacks have taken place, as we have seen from the charge sheets filed by the National Investigative Agency in India. Those charge sheets reveal that these people who were involved in some of the attacks were not actually Al-Qaeda and Islamic State members, but they have openly admitted, and in their residences, literature to do with these two organizations has been found. They have been inspired by them.
Well, on that note, I'd also like to bring in my second guest of today, Saleem Samad. He's joining us from Dhaka, Bangladesh. He's an award winning investigative journalist who brings with him decades of experience in covering these issues, particularly ethnicity and conflict management. Thank you, Saleem, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Now, I want to start by asking you about a top leader of AQIS, Ikram ul Haq, also known as Abu Talha, was recently arrested in Dhaka. He was one of India's most wanted militants, and this led to subsequent arrests in both India and Bangladesh, and they have sort of shed light on the growing influence of these groups in both the countries and the wider region. Do you see enough cause for concern, especially as both the countries are getting into elections next year?
Thank you. First, it is very important that to understand that India and Bangladesh have a porous border. So obviously, going to India from all the militants or the most wanted, they often flee to India and and like the other Islamists or the jihadists, they also come to Bangladesh. So this is and getting the name changed and having a national ID is not very difficult, because we have found recently that many of the Bangladeshi most wanted has gone to India, got a passport, and then they went to Middle East or other. Coming back to the Al Qaeda issue, first of all, it is very important that both the India and Bangladesh is sharing intelligence. This is officially now is open secret. So that is also had helped both India and Bangladesh to locate and identify these elements, especially the terror network, the sleeping cells in Dhaka or elsewhere.
Absolutely. You've made a good point. And what you said about the porous border is quite a challenge. In fact, the leader that I'm naming from AQIS, 𝗪𝗁𝗵 𝗗𝗲𝗽𝗁𝗵, he was in India, a few hours away from Delhi, actually, where he got indoctrinated in the small town of Deoband in Saharanpur, and then traveled all the way back to Bangladesh, where he was finally caught. So that remains one of the challenges, isn't it?
Of course, the most important is that I may sound very funny, that most of the jihadists, whether they have crossed from Bangladesh to India or they have crossed from India to Bangladesh, all got married. Majority of them got married and they were having a family. So that's also a cover to explain to the regime or to the eyes looking for them to behave as if they are a local guy and they are happily married and they are living in this place. So this is another challenge. The worst thing is that whether these jihadis are taking shelter in Bangladesh or the Bangladeshis militants are settling in India, they easily get an ID and they also get a passport. There is definitely a weakness in both the countries that they have not been able to stop them.
Absolutely. And that remains one of the key challenges. But General Arora, you mentioned the Jammu and Kashmir region, and you've served there also in the past. Now, if you look at the Global Terror Index of 2023, which is released by the Institute of Economy and Peace, India is ranked 13th, making it a very high impact country among the worst affected countries in the world by terrorism. Now, AQIS is only one of the additional outfits in the Jammu and Kashmir region, which is already a very crowded space, isn't it? There is Lashkar-e-Taiba, there is Hizbul Mujahideen. And what do you see happening here then? One, how do you see AQIS strengthening its footprint here? And two, how different is India as a breeding ground for AQIS?
You very rightly said that this global terrorism index includes all attacks by all groups, and it is based on the number of attacks which have been carried out. Well, the ranking could be slightly different because it relies on media reports and not on government data. But nevertheless, the situation has improved. In 2017, we were 8th. In 2019, we were 7th, but now we are 13th. That means the situation has improved. Now, if you see, since the abrogation of Article 370 of the Constitution, which applied to J&K since it was removed, and also after the president's rule has been implemented in Jammu and Kashmir state, the number of attacks, the number of successful infiltration attempts, and the number of arrests made, that has also gone down. Primarily, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the JEM, and the Hizbul Mujahideen are operating there. Al Qaeda and Islamic State J&K also have their cells there. Infiltration has come down since 2012, when there were 121 successful cases to just 3 last year. So the infiltration is mostly from Pakistan, but there have been some high-profile attacks. Like in 2019, the CRPF convoy in Pulwama was attacked with
Yes.
about 40 casualties, after which India launched airstrike at Balakot. Stone pelting incidents have gone down, overground workers' numbers have gone down, funding
So,
has gone down because
so,
there's
so
been a
on one
crackdown.
hand, so,
Yeah.
so on one hand, you're saying that
So
infiltration has gone down.
all this has helped in decreasing the number of attacks, and hence the improvement in the standing in the global terrorism index. Now,
Yes.
what does it
One
say
one
for?
second. I just want to
Yeah.
come in and ask you that, of course, it is the zero tolerance approach that the Indian government has when it comes to terrorism in the last few years, especially. The crackdown has really tightened. And you're right, infiltration has gone down. But on the other hand, when it comes to terror modules like AQIS, so far they did not have an appeal with the Indian Muslims or the Muslims in the wider region here. Do you think because of the Article 370, because of the president's rule, and because of the general environment that is changing and making minorities feel otherwise in the Indian subcontinent, is there a new breeding ground that is opening up?
Tulika, the breeding ground is in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. In India, these people are working, they're inspiring, there are sleeper cells, but because, as you mentioned, how does president's rule make a difference? It's because the political dispensation which was there earlier was sympathetic towards overground workers, towards these terrorists, and so that sympathy is not there. The bureaucrats are taking action. The security forces are taking action. And what has also helped is since Pakistan was in the grey list and was removed only recently in the FATF's grey list, Pakistan was also being a little sensitive and careful about infiltration and allowing these activities from its soil. So that has helped tremendously. But now, the change is that lone wolf attack and attack against soft targets have been taking place. Uh, Servicemen on leave or some migrants, laborers, and such like people have been attacked, or even based on religious faith, they have been attacked. But the attacks have been lesser and far between. So the situation is much, much better. What it holds for the future depends on these policies. You see, the process for delimitation and elections in J&K is also in process. Hopefully, next year elections will take place. It will depend on the type of government which comes in place.
Okay, so you mentioned FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force that lists countries, blacklists them, so grey lists them, who've been involved in terror funding. Um, and I'll go to Bangladesh's first experience of a large-scale terror attack, which was in 2005, when more than 400 bombings happened in less than 30 minutes, and Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh was the one that took responsibility for that. And later on, it was in 2016 when the Holy Artisan Cafe siege happened, and which was a shocking incident because it was from militants who had educated and wealthy family backgrounds. Over the years, how have you seen this space evolve, and what kind of counter-terror initiatives in Bangladesh have worked and have not worked?
Good question. It is very important to understand that the terror, the design and the action has dramatically changed. When we were talking about terrorism or jihad, say 20 years ago or maybe 30 years ago, especially during the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, it was always has been told that the jihadists or the militants, they are from the poor class, half educated, blah blah blah. But today it is totally wrong. If you are half educated, possibly the militants, these Islamic militants will not hire you. Maybe they are the foot soldier in Myanmar or in Syria, but not in the jihad. Jihad is now a very high tech, highly placed, highly educated, They have a different ideology, different mechanism, and we have to understand them. And everything is changing every day. According to Major General Saab has said, they have changing their strategy, they have changing their technology. So obviously you have to be very aware. In the, I mean, that holy artisan attack, you must have noticed that, yes, it is true that all the person who were in there are highly educated. They studied in private university. The
Yeah.
most important is the mastermind. The mastermind of that operation is Tamim Chaudhry, and he's a Bangladesh-born Canadian, and he studied in a university in Canada. He was irresponsible. He was in charge as an ISIS Bangladesh, and he was Amir. So he was
Yeah.
did not participate in it, but he was a mastermind. So you can understand that these boys recruits obviously like-minded people.
One thing that we both of you keep talking about and going back to over and over again is the terror financing thing. And India has had a big crackdown in this regard. What about Bangladesh?
Crackdown. If you said yes, of course, like as you said before, it is zero tolerance. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has a commitment for zero tolerance to terrorism, and she herself has talked to Narendra Modi, and even at the different level of the government regarding zero tolerance and cross-border terrorism. But the issue is that this doesn't stop terrorism. This doesn't stop the jihadist movement. This doesn't stop the jihadist fundraising. Let me just say, I mean, I have been always been very vocal in saying Pakistan has been already excluded from intelligence sharing. So I am not sure India whether India share intelligence or Pakistan share intelligence with India. Bangladesh doesn't. This is a major threat. So the threat perception has to be, if you have to literally make a map of the terror map, you have to have Pakistan also in the in the book to for
Okay.
intelligence sharing. It's not only that we get reports from the newspapers or get a thesis or from the researchers. That's not important from Pakistan. Pakistan is definitely a threat to terrorism in the region, especially in Bangladesh.
It has always been Pakistan's effort to link all the terrorist groups were operating in India and to synergize their activities. It has not been very successful for whatever reason. But the bigger threat for the time being is the Rohingya refugees which have come into India. They're very volatile. They provide a very fertile ground for recruitment into various terrorist groups. So, unless this problem is solved, they will remain a latent threat. We have seen recently there have been some problems in India in the state of Haryana where there has been violence and there has been an element of Rohingya refugees involved or behind it.
An
So
alleged, yes.
Pakistan is always going to exploit this. They for right now Pakistan is on the back foot, but it has always been their effort to bring all these terrorist groups together.
I want to also trace this route, and especially because we are talking about AQIS right now, I want to also ask you to trace this route back to Afghanistan, not just Pakistan. And ever since the Taliban government here has taken over, how have things changed?
Yeah, that has changed the situation. Uh, with the Taliban now in power in Afghanistan, although they made a statement they will not allow Afghan soil to be used by any person or any group for any terrorist activities against the United States or anybody else, uh, it has been meaningless. The Al Qaeda, some of them, couple of them are part of the Taliban cabinet. And although they have said they will not allow, but they're not in control of the whole country.
Yeah,
Taliban have,
officially they don't agree that Al Qaeda is part of the cabinet or
yeah,
in law enforcement agencies,
it,
but
uh,
we do
yeah,
keep hearing reports. Yes.
yes. And Taliban itself consists of so many subgroups who control different parts of the country. Not all of them have the same ideology and the views. So, whether Taliban or not, Al Qaeda and IS have found sanctuary a safe sanctuary in Afghanistan. They are consolidating, they are strengthening. And I suspect that India is being good to the Taliban, although it does not recognize the regime. But we have given it, even after the Taliban have come to power, we have given it assistance by way of vaccines, by way of food, by way of funding various schemes. That may be part of it, may be to ensure that some of these groups remain preoccupied and not act against India. As we can see, they are acting against Pakistan, but the situation towards India is still under control. The IS Khorasan is considered to be a little more violent and extreme than the
Yes.
Taliban themselves. But again, and there have been some cases of discord between them, but because they are a bit decimated, both Al Qaeda and IS are a bit decimated. So right now, but they have the numbers of say 4,000 to 5,000 of each in Afghanistan, more in Iraq and Syria.
Yes,
Uh,
including
it,
their family members, not just the fighters.
yes. So it is only a matter of time by when their consolidation is over and they start venturing out. So I think India and Afghanistan cooperation is also important. The last aspect is that the Americans have left so much arms and ammunition. Of course, they are not being shared free with these people. They are all being sold in the black market. Whoever pays the best gets them. But these weapons have already reached Iraq. They have reached Syria. They have been found to be used by militants in J&K, which has forced the Indian Army to revise their qualitative requirements for bulletproof jackets. Now they want bulletproof jackets against high velocity bullets. Earlier, it was a different level of protection. Satellite phones, night vision equipment, surveillance equipment has all fallen into their hands, and newer equipment, which clearly is American equipment abandoned in Afghanistan, is finding their way into J&K. So that
Okay.
is a matter of concern.
One sense
Yes,
I'm
please.
getting from both of you, Saleem and General Arora, is that because of the porous borders, there is so much of integration happening between India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And what can be done? You can't work in silos anymore. What can be done to jointly work on counter-terror measures between India and Bangladesh? What's the kind of bilateral cooperation that can happen?
Well, let me say on this, you see, right now the Al Qaeda and IS, their core is not present in India. Their leadership is not there. They are leaderless. Their propaganda is very active. The modules and their groups in India have got the resources. So we have to prevent them from getting together. The prevention can only take place if we cooperate and ensure that if the leaders are moving around from one country to the other, they are apprehended and eliminated as soon as this happens. Once they are able to come in and coordinate the actions of various sleeper cells, at least in India, this thing is going to erupt. That's what they are
Well,
waiting for.
well, the report does mention Osama Mahmood as the current leader of AQIS, but not particularly for India or Bangladesh, for the entire subcontinent.
Yeah. So right now, none of the people are here to actually ensure that integration of all these groups, consolidation takes place in India. And so, whether it is Bangladesh or whether it is Afghanistan or any other country, uh, this kind of intelligence sharing and to have agreements for deportation of their people arrested back to their country for facing legal action is required. And I believe Indian diplomacy has been very active. Whenever there has been a summit, on the top of the agenda is to strengthen the counter-terrorism cooperation arrangements that they have or intelligence sharing.
Salim,
I
would you
would
like to
like
comment?
to jump in. I would like to jump in, and I echo what Major General Aurora has mentioned. But this is also important that this counterterrorism cannot be left with the police, cannot be left with the military intelligence, cannot be left with this counter terrorism unit. because they are all government service holder. They are bureaucrats. I mean, so the political interaction has to be there. There should be a parliamentary oversight on this issue, which is absent in Bangladesh. This is number one. So I have a little doubt whether India and Bangladesh, despite talking about the best of the relations, which is true, well, on the other hand, Bangladesh and India, both of them has denied or has declined to sign the deportation agreement for the last for 30 years.
India and Bangladesh did sign an extradition treaty in 2013, isn't it?
Both Bangladesh and India, I mean Delhi and Dhaka, are not interested in this deportation agreement.
Well, that
at
is
all.
your
Otherwise,
opinion.
they would have
I
done
will
it.
say it for the
They
sake of
would
our
have done
audience.
it even 15 years ago when Sheikh Hasina came to power, and she had problem with what to do with this militant leaders, the Ulfa and the LTTs. I mean the Tripura and the Mizoram. So it was all in Dhaka. I mean the leaders, the chairman, whatever the name is, chairman is, they were in Dhaka.
Well, officially, India
She had a
has an
difficulty.
extradition.
So she had to literally grab them.
Yeah, but I
Take
have
them to
to
the
I have
border
to mention
and push
here,
them.
sir, that this is your opinion, and India does have an extradition treaty with more than 35 countries, and Bangladesh is one of them. However, it is clearly a very difficult discussion with many layers of complexities attached to it. I'm really, really thankful to both my guests. I'm sorry we're running out of time, but thank you so much for giving us an in-depth
Sure.
insight into the subject today, and for helping us unravel at least some layers of complexities to at least some extent. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulika.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And for our listeners, I hope today you got a more in depth insight into the topic about militancy and how it's changing face in South Asia. Do feel free to share your feedback with me on tulika.bhatnagar@pressxpress.org or DM me on Twitter and Facebook. You were listening to In Depth. Until we meet next time, it's Namaste from Tulika.